The 75th Ohio Volunteer Infantry was an infantry regiment from southwestern Ohio in the Union Army during the American Civil War. It served in the Eastern Theater, most notably in the battles of Chancellorsville and Gettysburg, and then in the siege operations against Charleston, South Carolina. Service history. The infantry regiment was organized at Camp John McLean near Cincinnati, Ohio, from November 7, 1861, to January 8, 1862, to serve 3 years. The 75th Ohio was initially led by Col. Nathaniel C. McLean, Lt. Col. R.A. Constable, and Marge. Robert Riley. The regiment began its service with 984 officers and men. Among the enlistees was future U.S. Congressman Henry Lee Morey. The 75th was initially sent to augment the Union forces in the Shenandoah Valley region of Virginia. It soon participated in defending what became known as Stonewall Jackson's Valley Campaign. On May 8, 1862, at the Battle of McDowell, the regiment lost 87 men. It fought again at Cross Keys before being sent eastward to reinforce the Union troops after the Peninsula Campaign. The 75th OV then participated in the subsequent Northern Virginia Campaign and fought in the Second Battle of Bull Run, where it lost 113 men. Within a month, it saw action at the Battle of South Mountain in central Maryland. 1863 Chancellorsville. During the Battle of Chancellorsville in May, the 75th Ohio was part of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Division of the 11th Corps in the Army of the Potomac. During the battle, the 11th Corps was far from the Confederate Army, so the commander, Marge. Gen. Olive Harrow. Howard did not have them dig defenses in case of an attack despite being ordered to do so by Marge. Gen. Joseph Hooker. On May 2, Confederate General Robert E. Lee decided on a daring and very risky plan. Knowing the 11th Corps was not prepared for an attack, he sent General Thomas Stonewall Jackson and his 2nd Corps of 28,000 men on a 12-mile march around the Union right flank with the hope of catching the 11th Corps by surprise. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the 75th's commander, Col. Robert Riley, had heard reports of a Confederate movement in his direction. Unlike many other commanders, including General Howard, Riley did not dismiss them. He prepared the 75th Ohio for an attack he knew was coming. He had his men lie down and rest by the guns and wait for the attack. Within a half-hour, Jackson's corps rushed out of the thick underbrush. When Jackson's corps struck at about 5 p.m., the 11th Corps was completely unprepared. Many of the men engaged in eating supper. Most of the 11th Corps was taken by surprise and broke for the rear without firing a shot. As other men of the 11th Corps ran by in a panic, the 75th Ohio stood and fired back at the Confederates. They kept up the fire for 10 minutes until the Confederates had overwhelmed the lines, forcing them to retreat. In those 10 minutes, Colonel Riley was killed, while 150 other men of the 75th Ohio were killed or wounded. 1863 Gettysburg. At the Battle of Gettysburg on July 1–3, 1863, the 75th Ohio, now under the command of Colonel Andrew L. Harris, arrived with the rest of the 11th Corps on the battlefield midday on July 1, 1863, the first day of the battle. The fighting had been going on since morning. As part of Brig. Gen. Francis C. Barlow's division, the 75th Ohio took a defensive position on Blockers Knoll, north of the town. Unfortunately, this slight rise in the terrain was too far forward in comparison to the other 11th Corps divisions, and Barlow's position formed a salient that could be attacked from multiple sides. Confederate Lt. Gen. Richard S. Ewell sent 2 brigades, those of Brig. Gen. George P. Doles and Brig. Gen. John B. Gordon, in a frontal assault on the Knoll. Barlow's division was overwhelmed, suffering serious losses, and Barlow was wounded and left on the field for dead. Harris led his men in a successful withdrawal through the hotly contested streets to Cemetery Hill, where they entrenched on the northeastern slope. Harris took command of the 2nd Brigade after its commander, Brig. Gen. Adelbert Ames, took Barlow's place as commander of the 1st Division. At around 7:30 at night on July 2, the 75th Ohio, positioned between the 25th Ohio Infantry and the 17th Connecticut Infantry regiments, now on a brickyard lane at the base of East Cemetery Hill, held off attacks by regiments of Brig. Gen. Harry T. Hayes, Louisiana Tigers Brigade. Overall, the Buckeyes lost 186 officers and men at Gettysburg. Actions later in the war. In August, the 75th OV was transferred to Charleston Harbor, remaining in the trenches in South Carolina until September. The 75th then moved to Folly Island, and then to Florida, where the men were mounted and designated as mounted infantry. The regiment served in Florida until the close of the war, participating in the Battle of Gainesville on August 17. 6 companies were mustered out in October and November 1864, while the veterans remained in the service until August 1865. Monuments. There are 2 combined monuments to the 25th and the 75th Ohio Regiments in the Gettysburg National Military Park. One is north of Gettysburg on East Howard Avenue on Barlow's Knoll. The second is on Wainwright Avenue on East Cemetery Hill.